Okay. So so today, I think as Ron pointed out, in order to make progress, you have to kind of stay with the same thing. Does everybody feel okay with that? That until we can say, hey, this is why Steiner chose this, we have work to do, right? And I think, uh, did anybody get a fresh look? Uh, I think it's pretty clear that the content doesn't really fit the form, right? So if I'm at worldwide expanses and I just walk a couple steps forward, that's not a really good match for our purposes, right? It's not an interpretive dance in the normal sense, unless someone can explain to me how. So our angle again is to use the organic thinking to see if it sheds light on the qualities of the geometry, right? So to remind ourselves that's mainly what we're about until it exhausts itself, either because it doesn't work or something else works. That makes sense.
Mm. Yeah.
The other thing I thought is the idea today was to look at the directions. So I made an attempt at kind of left and right on the stage. And then how far. So like what's the first thing you kind of notice stage-wise between the first and second half? Is that better? Does that get rid of the glare?
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, the second one certainly comes forward toward the audience a lot more.
Yeah. Did anybody else notice that with the forms? How the second half occupies more of the. It's so funny. I have the option to pin this so I can see it.
Yeah.
There you
I
go.
had okay, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just
Something that I mean something because you said to come with new ideas and maybe what you're showing now. I was thinking, what if actually Steiner took for at least for the first part more focus on the vowels and not on the consonant, and then in a way it becomes a tone eurythmy. And then what happens if what we are seeing is major and minor? I mean, this is crazy thought, right? But
So how does that relate to what's there on in the picture?
well, if we can, sorry, I'll pin the picture. So, I mean, Steiner gave rules, but he never drew by the rules that he gave to the Eurythmies, as far as I understand. But mainly in major, you will go more forward, right, and with minor, you will go more backwards, left.
So
Which is exactly the opposite of what you see. I mean, yes, maybe if you it's upside down, so maybe yes. So maybe maybe the red is a major and the blue is a minor.
Okay.
It can be so many things that it's difficult to. But if you just look at the vowels, for example, on the first one, it's hard to say it's clear, but maybe there is something. Especially the EE, the fourth sentence.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we did a little bit of a sketch.
At the German, not nothing.
Yeah, the German. So there's heavy on the E's and the N's. But so let's say just in the most general, and then we'll go specific. So when you're looking at this, what is the general direction? And I think Cindy, at least, how did you put it? Is that the form, as you could see, you have, I'm sitting in a funny way today, that when the first form is finished, so as it winds up and then comes around, all right, and then it finishes, right? And then the second form starts. And
And
it looks
sense-
like kind of how did you put it? There's a
It
kind of
moves.
a mirroring, right?
Yeah, like you go back basically over the path that you just walked and you end up back where you started. And it's in a different position on the stage clearly, but it's like an unwinding. You just retrace your steps.
Which racing is an ego line usually, so it's on the ego level. Just to give an indication.
So this would be your turning inside out, right?
Yeah.
Ja, Brot findet ich natürlich auch. Ja, Brot steht da.
Whoa. What was that?
The Swiss people talk.
Sorry, I'm outside.
Oh,
Swiss people with a relatively clean Basel accent. So the audience is obviously here, right?
yeah.
So if we go through it slowly, just one more time as a reminder, what effect does, I don't even know how wide these steps are, right? There's no indication, but I'm walking forward, right? Switching left, right, twice. So what kind of effect does that have if I'm looking at the audience and walking in these very tiny curves? Or do you imagine these curves to be 10 meters this way and 10 meters that way? It's more like just a few feet, I imagine. No? Does anybody know?
Can I just, one comment my teacher always made, looking at Steiner forms, that they are not to be read as forms walked on the floor. They are forms in space. So even if you see these curvy lines, yeah, that doesn't mean you walk every curve with your steps. You move them with your body. That means my curves can be actually quite small in stepping, but my body moves to one side and the other with the sounds I am trying to make visible. So I wouldn't be too fixed on how do we move, how do we step it. Can we just have it as a picture, as form? It's more or less a form of the etheric, which happens when the words are spoken and which the Eurythmists can tap in with portraying it. Yeah, that's just.
And so the spiral is form 2, but it's bigger, so you actually move along the spiral. Is that correct?
Sorry, Cindy, can you say it again?
So when you get to the spiral, you actually do move along the spiral, though, in
Yes.
space, right? Okay.
Yeah. Well, you keep to the idea of the form, but especially
you-
tight curls, if you would step this, that would look very silly, to be honest.
We don't step
My
it, of
opinion.
course, as such. We do not walk it on the floor, as you said. But I think one needs to differentiate if we have the thought pattern, the thought form, the thinking. We have the threefoldness of the thinking, the feeling, and the willing is the character. So what we see here is the thinking, is the thought form. But then we of course have the feeling, which is the veil, and the speaking, the singing with the arms, which then will create a much wider circumference, while it makes this extreme interesting contrast by having such a little form that we may as well walk with tiny little steps, but the circumference is very large because the feeling is expanded, because it comes out of Welt and Weiten. So we
Mm.
have the feeling and the thinking is these little steps, but the circumference is wide. So there's this contrast. And then of course the character is something added as well. But you know, I think this is the threefoldness. What's drawn is the thinking, is the Gedankenform, while we need to add the feeling also, which is the veil. And in that case, it's much larger than what's drawn here.
So just
think
to
in-
make
in-
sure I understood what you just said, this form that Mark's got on his board is the thinking part?
I would, yeah, the Gedanken, also the thought form, I think is the with meine Füße Wort, the speaking of my feet, of the words of the word of my feet. I'm speaking with my feet. I need to speak this with my feet as I walk it. But then it's not only that, I'm also singing with my arms. Like we have to have layers to probably to understand this. We cannot only look at this. We need to look at everything.
But
To
we
fully-
can't. No.
Yeah,
It's got
we
the-
can't- this is only one aspect. This is just the thinking, which I'm very sure has to do with the content of the text. And
Okay.
we do need to understand, firstly, what Rudolf Steiner is saying with those words, that he's speaking about Easter and which is the I consciousness born, like we need to understand the content, I think.
Mm.
Also, and then the sounds, of course. You know, that he has got wenn aus den Welten weiten, 3 times the W, is giving you a sheath. And I think the sheathing is depicted in this form, because you see all the layers, the way around, and another one, and another one. It's like an embryo, but it's got all the sheath around it. Yeah, the 4 sacs of the human constitution. The eye is the smallest one in the middle, then the etheric, then the allantois, and then we have the other one, which is the eye. So in that, I think it is a 4-fold human being there, very archetypally, but it's got to do with Easter, and the sounds and everything comes in. So it's hard to, you know, how can we think so multi-dimensional, because it's so much is in that. The form is just one little element of it.
But you have to start somewhere, no?
Yeah, exactly. So ideally, of course, we do it, and but so yeah, it's, and also I don't understand the second form. That what does that rate form? That doesn't look to me like how it's drawn by Rudolf Steiner. It seems like it's much more behind and around the second form. Mark, is that the second form, like that
The
one that comes to the
continuation?
front,
This
the
is
red
the
one?
reverse.
Let's see.
The 2 forms that
What
go
is it?
together. This is one person's movement of the.
Yeah.
Of the whole poem.
Yes.
So
Yeah, exactly. But the second
It's
form, which is in
the
that one, it's
purple.
purple. The purple, yes. But
Yeah.
the one you drew is kind of much more. It starts sort of in the middle and goes forward and then goes back. But originally, it doesn't start at the middle. It goes really around it. It's much more loosely. You know, but if you look at the original, it's not. I can't see the.
No, it's the other one, Simona. The other page. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I know you mean. Which one do you mean?
He's drawing that one.
One that is going out and forward and little and then back again. It looks like the red one. I don't know where is the red one on this form.
It's this one.
It is that one.
It is that one, exactly. That's what I mean. It is the second form, which is here. But this one,
When you put your paper in front, it blocks your microphone.
sorry,
Yeah. It's really funny. I don't know how it does it so well, but it like
I
literally.
don't know. So it starts here
Mark,
Yeah.
can I just point out something out on your whiteboard?
Yeah,
Second part of the form, which you drew red, goes first back and meets this little curve bubble in the back. You know, you have these 3 waves in the back, which the last wave, no, sorry, the first round shape when you move the first form back. So the second form actually goes this far back and goes through there because I just overlaid mine. I can see what it does. And then it winds like you drew forward. It just goes
Right.
further back.
But
That's
it
all.
is here, it's
okay.
around it, it's around
Yes,
it.
that goes, and it's more rounded.
And it's, yeah. I mean,
But, you know, it's hard to draw when you
Yeah,
draw it.
and-
Okay.
I think it's further back than that what Mark
Yes,
drew.
the beginning
Yeah,
part. but
I
the-
just made yours bigger. Wait 1 second. Okay.
Otherwise, it looks like too tight.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it
it's much
should be a
more
little
loose.
bit more at an angle.
The whole thing is loosened up. You know that the
Let's see. I mean, let's see. I have it here. I guess I did it at a crunch. Sorry about that.
because that's quite important that this form is much more hidden.
Yeah, all my proportions are a little off. Ooh.
I don't know if it makes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So go back further even. Yeah, take this away. Go back, even further back.
This
Much,
one.
yeah, further.
Yeah. It meets the little circular or open circular shape you have there in the back.
It goes all the way back here.
Yeah, it moves
Pretty
right
much.
there. Yeah, and then it opens up right, and it comes forward where you have it. Yeah, that's much better.
Sorry.
Yeah. And it closer. Yeah. It ends a bit further apart from the beginning.
Okay. But I think in the question for me in general movements is, does it it seems like in almost all of the 4 forms that are given, the turning inside out goes to the front substantially.
Yeah,
So,
in this case, yes.
right. And I think in 3 of the 4 cases. But I'll see for the only other detailed part I wanted to get done. So if we characterize when out of the farnesses of worlds, and you compare it to the sun speaks to human sense, just the form. So when you have this movement forward, what kind of quality does this have on the audience when you kind of meander forward? Like, how does that affect someone if you're in a moving performance and someone's just waddling? Like, how does that draw the audience's attention? What are they doing when you're walking that way?
Well, they're kind of trying to follow you, I think, with their eye. Wait, what are you doing there? You just try to go with it.
Yeah, so it has a kind of attention draw, right? Because since you're not moving far, but you're moving enough to catch their attention. So I gave that as a description, a kind of focus. Because how does that work if I'm moving, but not too much, but not enough where you have to like rechange your gaze, right? And then I stop, and then all of a sudden I'm doing this, right? And I'm covering actually quite a bit of territory. I'm even going behind.
I mean,
Well,
for me, Mark, I think this is because it's a smaller movement. It's much more powerful.
well, the
Because you are
question
doing,
is, what effect does it have on the audience to transfer out of this to this,
okay.
right? What does it
I think
demand
it's an,
of the audience?
I think it's an opening up, and something which I notice is what happens if we see all four of them is
Well,
spiraling
we'll start
out, and
one at a time because
yeah, I know, spiraling out. So I mean, you are
yeah,
coming
so what
towards
does
them,
that
then you are
do to
opening
the
up.
audience in comparison to this? So the new thinking only works if you compare, right? That we can agree as a foundational principle. So if this requires you to focus or, hey, what's going on here? Or at least a question, how does
think this-
that affect the audience? Or
I
it
think we
doesn't.
are.
Well, you lose the focus a bit. That kind of goes a bit more.
So
Um,
if I go like this all of a sudden, right? And then what's the tempo on the walking back? Is it a fast walking back, then I'll fall down? Or is it steady? Is it a phlegmatic? Is it like an etheric that puts you to sleep? Is it rhythmical? Is it choppy? How do you walk that? You guys walk these things all the time. Or are you supposed to really practice to maintain a uniform pace?
Well, it depends. I mean, first of all, it depends on your artistic choice, but also it depends on the words.
Exactly.
I
I
mean,
think the
that's-
words are important.
Language. The rhythm of the language also is a guide.
Yes. Yeah, everything with the words. It's rhythm, it's structures, it's vowels, it's consonants, everything. Also, now we can say also the level of the sentence.
But go into the directionals. Don't get too fancy.
Mhm.
So what is he doing exactly? Not what like, okay, I feel like this on Monday, but Tuesday I might feel different. That's fine. I mean, an orchestra has to play softly in a small space and loudly in a big space. That's fair, right?
The one
But-
comment I would make about the contrast to those two forms is the first part seems to me to be more driven by the consonants, and then the circle has more of a vowel quality in it just by looking at the form.
But it can be also wheel and feeling, which is maybe
For
you can
that
say consonants and vowels. Also,
Yeah, but
yes.
this is a pretty easy sell because we have a verb here and then a verb here and then no verb here and no verb here. So you have your rhythm. You have a static, just
Mm.
prepositions, right? So here I am out of the worldwide universe planets. The whole universe is here. So why am I moving if I'm the whole universe? Right? And then now the sun is speaking, right? Now, is this sun speaking quickly? Or is it speaking uniformly? And is it speaking in terms of movement much more than form one would or line one? So if you see this as movement, sure. Or is this establishing that the universe is there? And in this universe, now he brings something into movement, the sun. Is there movement?
Yeah.
Maybe harness? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is movement, and when the sun speaks to us.
Well, that's
So,
mine too,
yeah,
right?
but the first one is like you established, there is the cosmic, the worlds. There are the worlds. It's
The
more
other
as
worlds,
and
right? But
focus.
interesting because worlds go both ways, up, down, sideways, right? So
Yeah.
there's the kind of staticness of the farness. The worlds themselves are not moving. but the sun is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And so does that accurately kind of, what is this? And what happens to the audience's eyes and soul if you're doing this?
it gets moved along.
Okay. So you have to start to focus a little bit in the active. You have to change your gaze, right? Because they're covering ground.
Yeah.
So let's say you have an active. And then from this active gaze of 2, what happens in 3 to the audiences? Now you're walking back, you're moving sideways. Is this a hard thing to walk or to move? Because you're kind of coming to a point and then bowling out in a circle and then coming back a little bit to where you were, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is that to walk that? How does the audience, so if this is our grid, now you're kind of in the last third of the stage. How does the audience see you compared to when you were spinning? You've just
Way
come
back there. I have a question about how that would, do you guys know whether you would face into the inside of the loop on that form? Would you turn yourself at the beginning of that form and face inward?
No, you stay frontally. You,
Yeah.
Okay,
you really stay frontally.
okay, I just wanted to know that, but you're way
Mm.
back of the stage, so
Mm.
so it's less of a focus for the audience.
You're sort of going into another dimension in a way, isn't it? You're disappearing from the center and you're going further back and you're not as visible in some form
Yeah,
for the audience. You're kind of creating a bigger,
kind of subtle.
yeah. Mm.
So
subtle
what do you
energy.
like as a catchword for that? The subtlety or the invisibility? Or are you taking a little rest in the back? Or is it like, in a river, there's a little pocket that stops the flow? What would be a good adjective for how the audience reacts to you? So you're coming from this loop-de-loop, right? And then all of a sudden, you have these tricky little, I don't know what it is, a bulbous shape. Is that hard to walk? Does that feel comfortable? It seems to me kind of challenging to, if you're not facing that direction, then you kind of have to practice this, right? So you don't bump into people.
Yeah, I think this is what, moving is what an easy form. There are much more complicated ones, so difficult.
Right.
But I
But
think for
compared to
me,
this-
you're leaving the space open. If you the first one is hardly moving, the audience will hardly see that you're moving towards him. It's a very small thing. It will more feel sideways, and then you open a space, and then somehow you maintain the space.
And maintain the space here, you mean?
Yeah, all over the back. I think the astral is all over the back. It's all curvy
Well, that's
line
our
over the back.
next question. What do you guys
Oh.
feel about this now? That the astral still goes to here? Or is it transitioned here? And if you play your cards right, enjoy out of depths of soul. Or
Yeah,
is
it's
it
like that
joy
little
out of
eddy.
depths of soul? Ha 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 ha.
Just
Does
the
that,
loop.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just the loop.
Yeah.
Just the loop. How about the others? How do you guys feel about that?
Which loop are you talking about?
Yeah, it's
I
just a
think,
little
yeah.
loop
One
at the
with the
back.
little man. So
Yeah.
this
No.
would have
On the
been
third line.
and this would be
Mm.
our new astral loop. And then, or
I
maybe
I would go a lot further.
Yeah,
you
me too.
would.
One more
I-
curve at least.
I would make it all the way around. You could say the bump at the back and a little bit around, and then for the ego line, it's just to me the curve around the front. So I would have a lot more in that astral line. Because it's quite contained, form number 1. All the other forms are moving much more, are behind them, coming behind them in a slightly larger form.
Right.
So the one is quite contained and held.
We see, I wouldn't do that at all. I would completely keep it in this little loop
Yeah,
because
me
it's
too.
the astral. It's a real contained, this joy And then
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
eye, I would just really then embrace the whole rest
Yeah.
of it. And that Licht, the light is this little bump, and then it goes all around this Vereinigung. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, this is, and that's where we're probably individual, because Solo Steiner didn't give us the indication. We have to be free and go with what we are.
And Simone, I might like it that way too, after working with it. Right now, we're just talking about it. So it'd be, to me, an experiential thing to really feel it.
And you
Yeah, I
need to,
feel like that little loop is like an inner pause where the joy is collecting, and then like,
Yeah, that's what I feel.
go to really burst out in a power move.
Mm.
Well, you see, it's all in the back too, right? Now,
Yeah.
it's not in the super back of the stage, because I believe the other forms go behind that one a little bit, right? Am I crazy?
They do go behind it. That's what I
And-
mean by that the number one is held, because the other forms are bigger and going behind it. So it's whichever part of the verse you're doing that on, it's the inner part of the sheath. There are two other people moving behind you.
Yeah. So I guess, well, let's say according to Steiner,
One in
the
front of you.
distance is about this far. So this would be the very back of the stage. If those things
Yeah,
matter,
it's,
right? Because you have two more columns. So
yeah, a little bit.
the proportionality of what we have, I don't think is crazy, right? It seems to be, makes sense. It's still,
I have balloons in my.
what's that? Say it again?
How did you do that?
Balloons in my screen.
What happened?
I had balloons floating up through my screen.
You did?
Yeah,
How did you do that?
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, you clicked, or somebody sent you something, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe my bird, I don't know.
But it had exactly those colors, blue and red, and
See, Rudolf Steiner
Hello.
is talking to us.
Holy
maybe he's
shit,
talking
that
to
was
you and
weird.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
telling
Wow,
us
it's
we're
on tape, right? So this is for posterity. Okay. So, but we're somewhere, and we're also kind of free here, right? I mean, I imagine it would make sense. It would make sense almost if, as out of soul depths, joy, you know, to put the joy. Come here, little cute. He really loves you guys. He's excited. Now, if we look at what the ego would do, right? How would you judge this movement? So now I'm in the back, kind of meandering, but at a good tempo if I include all the curves. And then all of a sudden I come really, I mean, I'm walking straight. So I can develop some, what's the word? Velocity. And then I come back after I've walked to the very front of the stage, right? And then I settle. Like, here I am, right? That was my feeling. So your astral's kept in the back, and then comes the running to the front of the stage, and it's on the right side. I thought that had to have, I can't find meaning in it yet, but I thought the fact that it's like a right enfilade or whatever that's called. Is it okay to use military terminology? Any thoughts about that ego curve? Or
Yeah,
what
it's
would be a good way to characterize it?
pretty bold move.
Bold move?
Mm-hmm.
And then how does the audience feel if you're running at them? Is it like the surprise symphony where it's da 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 da, right? And then you're falling asleep and all of a sudden the Eurythmus runs at you.
Well, that guy's back
Funny
again.
bit of
Whoa, where did they come from?
it comes in a curve and it has a sheathing quality. So the audience should experience them kind of enfolding you, even going behind you and sort of then pulling you back a little bit, you know. So it has this kind of gathering sheathing quality.
Interesting.
You should
Like
feel it. You
audience
should feel that you're inside of that if it's a good movie. As
That's-
an audience member, they've come and gathered you in.
Whoa.
Right.
Kind of got a uniting mode,
Yeah.
isn't it? Something
Feeling.
comes together. This
Yeah.
embracing means uniting,
Yeah.
coming together.
That was the word we used in the beginning, like encompassing, and now we have uniting and we have embracing. And so maybe that is the ego, like as a general text work term, right? The
Mhm.
ego unifies. The ego connects the concept with the percept. The ego takes the
Unites
bits of the
together.
world and makes them into a coherent whole, right?
Yeah.
I like that. So you're moving forward and you're kind of like hooking the audience in.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Does anybody disagree, theatrically speaking? Does
And
anybody
then if
find
you look at do the comparison with the other forms, you'll see that there's this kind of movement that does that, like four movements that will actually, have this dimensionality to it in that last part.
That will do that.
And then there's a holding of that, a unifying and a holding. So
what
you
was
can
the other word you used before?
sheathing,
No.
Encompassing.
Embracing,
Encompassing.
uniting,
holding.
encompassing.
Yeah. But there's this
Okay.
kind of there's this
Nice.
reaching out and pulling in. There's a definite pulling in, but not back to the center, but a shaping. Like when you do bread and it's got bigger, but you shape it, you mold it. The four will all do that, even though they might go in different directions. The audience will feel that, will feel this kind of formative work, formativeness of that end of that first stanza, that first part. It's in all the four.
For me, what I'm seeing here somehow is a spiraling out, and if we spiral out, and in a way we can look at it as going up in levels. So you can even say it's really levitating. You're bringing them from down, and you're going like the road spiraling. You're spiraling out, and then you're spiraling in. So you're bringing everybody up, and then you unite them back with the earth. So you're going up to the spirit, going back down to the earth on the second move. So if we see it, we're not, in a way, if we leave it leaving the two-dimensional, we're going up in space also. And you're opening the space and going up. And then you're
Okay.
closing the space and going down.
Well, that's a good transition thought, right? So now we look at the obviousness that there's also a kind of circle, kind of spiraling in on the red, on the second half. However, let's look at the gestures first and the directionals. So now you've landed with unites itself to the light and seeing. And then you're facing the audience. And I imagine then it's spoken then out of selfhood move, right? And how are you moving exactly? You're moving at a 45-degree angle of sorts. Is that right? Sorry for my drawings. It's backwards, but sideways, right?
Mhm.
So what do you guys think of that? How would you run that? Is that you're moving sideways?
You mean the second form?
Yeah. So what's the effect on the audience? Now, there's some interesting stuff because you have a little crissy-crossy for the first time, right? Is that indicative of anything?
But nobody's there at this time.
No, but it's like your after picture is still, you've created this etheric form in space,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're crossing over what you've created. Is that significant? Maybe no, I'm just throwing that out there, but how would you characterize this movement here for the audience?
It's like a
Like
slap.
John was saying, I think you've gone to another level, and so there's this reshaping at another level, but the other direction. So there's a kind of folding back at another level, And that's why it's so much.
I like that. So if this is like an unfolding, so you've gone like this,
Yeah,
and now you're,
yeah.
so
You're in
an
an
absolute
spiraled up
change
somehow.
of the spiral. Is that good enough for a turning inside out? What you said? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it's a very much turning inside out. It's a whole change when you change the spiral direction.
Mm.
You can even say you're
So-
going from a question to an answer. I mean, there's so many things it can say. But,
So I think in German it's done, right? Done. So it's more or
Yeah,
less
done.
like English. So you'd have your gesture, right? Then turning it inside out. So it'd be quite a D, right?
Mhm.
And then you would move that, right? So then before the poem starts, you have your D, E, N. And then what happens, right? What is it in German? Den aus dem
Dann
Selbstheim.
ziehen.
Dann ziehen. Okay. So you've just landed and you finished the form, and then you're moving into the next one, right? And then how are you walking this? Is this a reasonable tempo, or is this a parading? Like what is this? I think maybe the mood will tell us what it is if I'm walking at this angle. What would be the proper mood, even out of the meaning of this? Is this a celebration of your selfhood? Is it slow, in other words, or is it dynamic? Any feelings on that?
I think it's reasonably calm and peripheral and hovering, like it's not very dynamic, or it's like more on the circumference. It's
Like a sliding away somehow,
sheath. Yeah, it's gliding on the
away.
Is it a
Yeah.
hard angle to walk as a eurythmist?
No.
it's not angular. The whole thing is quite round.
No, it's not
It's
difficult.
curved.
It's not challenging in
No,
any
it's-
more than anything else.
It's,
So
it's not.
if it's not challenging, what's the second effect if you're moving? Well, how far back are you actually moving? Is it perceptible to the audience?
Well, I think if you're at number one, then you'd be really concentrating on number two, because number two is pulling away from you, and you're going back and it's coming. I think that's right. Or do you come forward?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a pulling away, so there's a tension between you. But I agree, it's a calm tension. But it's still an awareness. So that would actually moderate the moving, how you move together. Because the 1 and the 2 in that second form and the 3 and the 4 are both have this tension of moving away from each other. And so that all happens together. That all happens simultaneously for that line, for the beginning of that line. Then, and there's this kind of pulling part. So that tells you the type of movement of this pulling apart.
Do you
Not
feel
isolated.
that the then is a real inversion word?
What's the second word? Den siphon. What does siphon mean?
Ziehen aus
Ziehen.
der
It's full-
Selbstheim.
Ehen.
Ziehen.
Yeah.
Tracking, like ziehen. It's like clouds are hovering. You know, ziehen
It's
means
this
they're
cloud.
just
It's this cloud
just
sort of movement.
spreading out a bit. They're very calmly
Breathing. Yeah.
going there on the sky. Like
So
you're
you
definitely
exactly. You
wider.
would move like that. You would move into that kind of
Into the is there, yeah, into another realm, as you said. You know,
yeah.
you go
You're already
moving
in
into
another realm, so
Yeah.
you initiate the movement in that realm.
So wait, ziehen would be like es zieht gerade? Like that?
No, it's
No.
ziehen means like it's when
Something is pulled out.
clouds are pulling out, just
Well,
moving gently on the sky along.
Yeah, like
see
the
them.
seat or no?
So you can see the pulling out between the 1 and the 2, and you can see the pulling out between the 3 and the 4. So that pulling out happens.
But don't forget 2 and 3 pull together.
Yes. Well,
There is another dimension. You can't just,
Yeah,
the-
And you have embracing, because while one is going from the
Yeah.
back to the left, you've got three coming around the right, so they're moving in this
Right.
that embraces something.
yeah. So I'm just talking about how it starts. It starts with this pulling, two lots
Yeah.
of pulling on each
Yeah.
side. Yeah.
That's correct.
And that's you've reached that turning point, or what you call the inversion, and now you've got this,
And you
gone-
have the feeling of
and you
pulling.
just got this little, and then the shaping will come out of that. Yeah, it's not a contraction; it's this pulling apart, and it's a relationship. So,
So 4
I'm
and
trying to
5,
answer your question, Mark, about the quality of the movement. It's
Yeah.
that's that. Yeah,
go ahead.
it
I'm
leads
sorry.
you to. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm not interrupting you at all. Say it
Yeah,
again.
because I didn't know that this feeling of the clouds, like if you imagine how the clouds move apart, and break up, there's a feeling like that, of this pulling apart, but also that another form can come out of that. And so I imagine that the next part would shape something from that pulling apart with those four.
Well, I mean,
So-
the German word pulling, it's not quite pulling. It's like moving. When we say in German, we are moving out of the house, wir ziehen aus. It's ziehen means more like we are simply moving. It's not like a sort of a pull. It's just you're moving. You're just, in poetry we say die Wolken ziehen am Himmel.
Well, you can say also einen Zahn ziehen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
the
don't think
thing.
this is meant here. Like that's a
I
radical
know,
move.
but there are many layers of this word. So
Yeah, I
it's
know there is many layers, but in this
So-
case, it's that kind of like this hovering.
well,
Ziehen is a
something
gentle,
from the Selbstheithhülle is rausgezogen.
yeah, but not forcing it. It's like it's just
Oh.
zieht aus. It's just, it's not
Yeah.
like
But
it's
if it's come together, then it kind of pulls apart a little bit. That's how I'm
Yeah.
seeing it.
yeah, totally. It's really loosening up. It's
Loosening.
widening out.
I see
Loosening
why.
up.
Because the thoughts, ziehen, nothing is pulling them. It's not like ich ziehe
No,
an die
no,
Tür, right? It's natural.
it's
Yeah.
natural. It happens.
Maybe it would be nicer in English, instead of move, to have a slightly more poetic word.
Yeah, so
Uh,
what?
but that's so okay. But I think Leanne's
Yes, it's
point,
so
if I
cool.
understand it correctly, Leanne's point is, okay, we have this next movement, and this movement is not sharp. It's like preparing. Do I understand you correctly? You could tell me I'm completely wrong, but because I think what you say makes sense to me visually. So if I understand you correctly, and I've just come to a point, and now if I just move like this, I'm not really very formal, right? It's like you said, like almost like I'm preparing something. And so this, I don't know if the ego level is like a preparatory. I never thought of that word, but maybe that's what it is. And that's the mood of the inversion. This is an inversion on the ego level,
Yeah.
right? And so if we're displaying, everything Rudolf Steiner does is a teaching moment for new thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm teaching, as a eurythmist, people who are maybe too lazy to learn text work can, now that the first four have come to an end, and then I say, then, my dear friends, and now I go lightly in a mood of the way Leanne better described it. It's like almost like I'm gathering the preparation for what's
Yeah.
next.
You could
And-
even call it
Yeah, go
intention.
ahead, sorry.
It could even be intention if it's on the ego level. It has some sort of intention, but it hasn't come into being yet.
But I like that gathering, because gathering doesn't necessarily mean you're scurrying about, but you're creating something, I don't know, for later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
So what word could we use for that? This is really important. And it would be one thing to say this is a bold move, but does anybody think this is a bold move or is it a careful move? Because of its lack of sharpness or curvature or going in on itself. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, where's the inversion? Do we all agree that the inversion could even be like conceiving? Maybe that's a good word, or contemplative?
And the inversion comes with your end destination also. Right? Because we have in our mind when we start moving, we have the end of the form already. So the end of the form, if we look at it, it's already an inversion.
The end of the form here, and now we're just filling it in. Do I understand what you mean or not really?
Yeah, I didn't hear exactly what you said, but
Oh,
sorry.
it's getting complicated. I guess my question is Leanne right in that this is a careful, like, preparation inversion?
I mean, for me, yes, because I see it as, again, trying to see it now as a spiral coming in, then we are gathering from the outside.
Yeah,
So it's a big preparation to
Does
slowly.
everybody think gathering does that do justice?
yeah, I think so.
Leanne and everyone else gathering? All right, let's try that. I think it's interesting. So then, out of selfhood, what's the word? Hula, selfhood sheath, move. So, and if her metaphor of the cloud is right, nobody's pulling, nobody's moving it, right? Like the thoughts are not being moved, but they're moving on their own. Or do you feel like it's a comet? They're moving into distant spaces very quickly out of the selfhood.
Mm-mm.
Because if we don't have qualities for physical, etheric, astral, turning inside out in polarity, we're in trouble. Because none of this works because the geometry, as much as it justifies some things, there's a million contradictions.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What about line 6? Where does that start?
That's coming forward,
Forward.
the waves coming forward.
So would you say it, sorry about my little humble one. So about here or more on the top? Kimberly?
Shelby, it's hard for me to see.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry. I can redraw it maybe a little darker.
It's just, you've done the curve over the back, and then it begins pushing out and coming forward, pushing out to the Eurythmys left,
Yeah.
viewing stage right. When it starts waving out.
Around
Um,
here.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you guys think? Does that feel good?
I think earlier, but
Okay. I mean, when you say earlier, like an inch or like 6 inches?
almost way back where.
At the top?
Yeah.
So it rests in the back. Then out of, okay. We have an issue about 5 has a verb and so does 4. But 6 does not. Does that matter?
Well, look where it's going. Thoughts into distant spaces, and it's kind of wandering off to the left of the stage left. It's kind of wandering into the periphery.
Yeah, but you have to be, you have to be careful with the literal. If it's literal, okay, we don't know this yet. But if you interpret literally, we all know that you can kind of get yourself into a quagmire. Now, remember, 5, 6, 7, 8 are umgestülpt, right? They're inverted. So I think we already figured out you have a bold encompassing movement in 4, And this gathering movement in 5, it's two sides of the ego, right? One is this gathering. And then what's going to be the contrast between 3 and 6? You have depths of soul and thoughts in distant spaces. Which side is outer? Which side is inner? Right? Kind of tricky here. Is there a polarity between 3 and 6?
Yeah.
And if there is there a difference between the astral and the spirit self?
Well, you have one at the back of the stage and one at the front. It's always the same thing.
Yeah, so let's say the second half is like, wow, you know, this is evolved into the front of the stage. It's closer to the audience.
Yeah, and it's almost like a transformation of from the joy from the depths into the thoughts into space. It's like it's a
So
movement
it's what,
from
yeah. So it's fair what you said, right? In terms of meaning, to say that the spirit self is in the spaces, right? It's a transformed astral.
Yeah.
Where the
Yeah.
astral leans on itself, the spirit self is in distant spaces. Oh my goodness, what's going on, right? Is that what is it? Anybody have a feeling about that from the form? Or do we need to smoke more weed or something like that?
Yeah, we definitely have another puff right here. It's like an expansion.
Yeah, well, let's use the word like a lot. That will be like the good old days, like.
Well, you have from the little closed loop of the astral at the third, you have now quite an open space compared to the little
Right, but
closed
let me
one.
ask you directly, is line 6 spirit self or is it astral? And this is something I was struggling with. If it is spirit self, then it's not simply astral, and that would be a theme. So let's say if you have a poem that has so and so many lines, your inversion would have to somehow affect the audience completely differently. And what is the spirit self doing?
You know, it's really interesting in a way, if you compare that, the movement goes in a curve towards center stage, like a scoop. So that really is in contrast with the type of movement that the ego encompassing movement is. So how do we feel the difference in that? By wavering in the other direction, you're not doing an encompassing move. It's something really distinctly itself. You know what I mean?
I think I need another bong hit. Or Ritalin, one or the other. Maybe both. And then some ludes. Yeah. Or cocaine. We need a lot of cocaine. You got to stay really focused.
Hey, shut up.
That wasn't directed at you. I mean, I have
Yeah,
a point
sure.
where
I'm just trying to get the mood of this line.
the astral line.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, isn't it?
I am with you all the way. Okay, so your astrality starts
Thanks
here.
about me if you tried.
Here.
Yeah.
And where does your astrality end? Or spirit selfness?
Well, mine goes all, I
Bed.
don't know about everyone else.
Where?
Mine goes to the bottom.
Does anybody agree with that?
Anybody?
Yeah, I guess it's where it turns the Bind and Dumpf, that's from coming down just before it goes up in again.
So thoughts into distant spaces. Now you're bringing the thoughts into the audience, right? You're walking forward, meandering, big meandering, right? This is that's a lot of ground to cover. So that might have a distinct effect on the audience, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of a wide meandering feeling about that line. Like it's really a big exploration in a sense.
Well, maybe the forms that are turned inside out have more of that boldness
Yeah,
because they're
like a big exploration is pretty bold, right? It's an expansion for sure, if you want to talk expansion and contraction.
it's without a verb, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and the
It doesn't
ego.
mean anything per se, but
Ego, line 5 was more of a contraction movement or feeling about that movement. With that sliding away. Gathering is a contraction. Getting ready for some movement and action.
so how would you guys walk this?
Very lightly and, you know, very peripheral in some way. It's not an activity word in there. It's really freed. It's really a freeing up of the thoughts, the world of thoughts
And what
hovering.
about the tempo? So the tempo would be light and quick, or
Not very quick, I think very
No, there's
calm.
not. Number one is the only one that's moving forward. The other three are streaming back. And so you really feel this sense that one is holding the contrast while the other three are lifting up into the space behind. It's very beautiful.
wait,
And,
what's
and
space
the
behind?
feeling of
You're
harness
going
is
forward
space.
here. You mean in the second half?
No,
Yeah.
the other people.
Say it again.
There's
Other
Or-
people.
my version of all four of them for that one. Is that visible?
Oh,
Yeah.
hold on. I'm standing up. Wait. Let me,
So you see the purple dot, the dots are the color of the veils, but I made them all pink because it was the pink line. And it's, you really have the feeling of, it comes alive between the eurythmists. The purple one, number one, is moving forward. The other three are all streaming back.
But it's like clouds, you know, you're passing
Yeah.
by each other very calmly. You just brush past each other like angels in another sphere, you know. You just sort of it's like a coming and going. It's like a meeting, and it's just lovely. It's just free of any. It's freed up. So
are
So
we
that's,
talking about the line 6 still, I hope?
yeah, line 6,
Yeah.
Gedanken. Yeah, it's just
Yes,
a
we.
passing by.
Okay. So what adjective would you give line 6? As you're walking it, tempo. So you're still running at the audience.
But you won't be running, but you are coming towards the audience in some way. But
So it's more gentle.
it's
I'd
not, yeah,
say-
it's not confronting. You know, it's not sort of
You mean-
limiting space. It's not like
Ethereal.
it's not like you're contracting.
Okay, and then that could be justified because of the waviness, right? It's unlike this one where you kind of march right up. This one has this constant waving, so it's gentle.
Yeah.
Anyone disagree? It's gentle, but it's still going towards the audience pretty substantially, right? I mean, it's gone from the way back all the way past all of the activity so far. So does that have any meaning?
I wouldn't include that curve around the front. I would just have the two waves. So to me, it's not
I mean,
an
like
overly,
here and there?
yeah,
Okay,
that's all I would be doing.
but then, so your ego level would start to lose its kind of magisterial or gathering quality, no?
No, the
You have
ego
to
level,
change the
I'm seeing
tempo?
here. The ego level, sorry, I can only show you my ones where I put them all simultaneously. My ego level is just this curve. It doesn't have the wave, it's just the curve.
Hold on.
That is, to me, all four of them doing the ego level.
Hmm.
Oh,
I mean,
okay, so you don't get into, so the one at the top is what we're looking at, right?
yeah, this one is the purple, number one.
Okay.
So that to me was the ego level, and then the then astral inversion.
And then where's your next?
My next one, which is the very, you get a couple words. And it's interesting to me, the whole gesture of it actually fits exactly with what it's saying. It's this binding, and as a group, they're really binding something.
Is there
Yes.
a rule about length of form and length of line?
A practical reality.
Yeah, but that's, we all know that sometimes the opposite's the case, right? So you would never say, although astral makes sense, kind of an enclosed area, but it also could be, let's say, confronting, or it could be contrasting, or, you know what I mean? Like, not to get stuck.
I
But-
think you're right, yeah.
Is there any, can you, I mean, it would be little, I don't know, how would you speak this? Then out of selfhood sheath move, right? So obviously the emphasis would be on the then, right? Then out of selfhood sheath move. Thoughts into distant spaces. Would you say that slowly? We said gently. Thoughts into distant spaces.
Yeah, that
And
sounds
now
like,
you have your verb, right? And dimly bind. So what quality are descending greens? And how does that work in this case in 7? Or doesn't it work?
Can you say that again, please, Mark?
Yeah, so let's say for 6, the archetype of the spirit self would be necessity and benefit for humanity, timeliness. So it's different than the astrality, which is a contrast with sympathy, antipathy. So that's why you can have joy in sentence 3 and thoughts in sentence 6, because 6 is about the value of the spirit self activity and the renewal of things. So a gentle quality seems to make much more sense than if I said, this descending red has to be filled with sympathy and antipathy. That would make no sense, because
No.
this is spirit self, life spirit, spirit man. And when Steiner dimly binds,
So it's the etheric body on the descending life spirit.
yeah, so
It
what
is-
quality is that life spirit? You know, it's very, I don't know, what's the planet that's very slow? Jupiter? Like,
Saturn is, yeah.
normally 7 is the archetype. It's the fullness, it's the history, it's the evolution. And Steiner doesn't present it that way, right?
well, it's like a formative quality, like something's being formed anew. So whatever the fruit of what's happening in this verse is being brought into some form.
Yeah, you have
It's
to
like that-
continue the sentence.
It's
So
kind of
the
a transition line.
Sorry, go ahead.
Because it says, and
It's
dimly
transition.
bind man's being to spirit existence. I think you can't just write on this, on dimly bind, you have to see where it goes, and then it makes sense. It's not,
My question though remains the same, because as a reader of, let's say, spiritual poetry, is it a quick dimly bind? Or is it extremely slow because it has the fullness of, you know, like everything's in context? Is it a pause, maybe, thoughts into distant spaces
You
and
mean,
dimly bind?
it
It's got
sounds
a
like
certain
process.
slowness, slow and a bit weighty, a bit
Yeah,
heavy, a little. That's why it's at the front. It's just a turning point before it goes back again.
Does anybody
The-
not
the
like
way-
that? Oh, a weightiness. Does anyone would that work for us just because we don't have the words yet, right? So it's weighty.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's the question how again, isn't it? How is it done?
It has to be the question, because if we don't answer the organic thinking, then Steiner's poem is not organic. You see the problem? It's like we're stuck. If we can't understand what he says and how he says it, then the movement can't be a reflective of what he's saying. It's just random. Maybe this form doesn't even belong to this calendar and someone put it in the book and we're just pretending to figure it out. Like, we don't know. This happens to his lectures, by the way. People edited his lectures after he died. And his wife changed the chapter numbers on his autobiography.
Oh my
So you
God.
have to be very careful. Whenever you do something from Steiner, you got to call Dornoch and get the original manuscript, because they changed a lot of his stuff. So I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, I believe this is true.
As if
I
it
hope-
isn't difficult enough as it is, thanks.
Well, it's one of the great problems that George and Lowndes,
Yeah.
and then of course the men in Flensburg, they figured that out. There's 2 Christian community priests. They went through the original scripts and they said his Christology has enormous discrepancies from the original transcripts. And they don't know who added and took stuff out. So there's a war, and there's scholarship that shows we have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Sometimes they change stuff to be the completely opposite of what Steiner said. That's how bad it is. Not in the education lectures, because those have been gone through very carefully. But where stuff was just handed down and quickly printed, there's a lot of mistakes. So anyway, if this is where the spirit self, where does the life spirit end? Any thoughts about that?
Just before the ascending again, just the lower curve is
Here?
before it goes up again. Yeah, it's somewhere there. It's just slightly different from the original form, but somewhere. Just a little form only. The 7 is really little.
So this
It's
would be
got
the
that-
life spirit, this little section here.
A little section, because it's just this condensing just before it rises up again. It's really a
And-
contrast, contracting, and then it goes up. It's like resurrecting from
Does
that.
let me just get back to it. Does everybody feel the transition from the life spirit, the spirit self to spirit man should be at the front of the stage? Does that directional, does that somehow make sense?
I don't have it there.
Where do you have it?
Well, I have the front of the stage where which you drawn a little bit different than it is in the original.
Oops.
There is this curve, which is the binding quality, similar to what Kimberly showed actually in her forms.
So this one would be a little rounder here.
Yeah, that's a bit rounder, and that's the whole
It's not
binding.
clear.
And dimly bind in a small form. Very
Would be
similar.
just this little part here.
But that's just my take on it. So please.
No, it's important that at least everybody hears something different. And whether, like we said before, like,
Also my astral, is slightly different. So I just, at the moment, listen to other opinions.
okay. And then where is your spirit man after that?
It's after the going back,
Okay.
after the binding quality, moving back a little bit, yeah.
Any thoughts on the closing of this form, the 8th line? How would you walk it?
It's very enlightened again. It's just really has a ascending, triumphant, uniting quality again. To unite with the light, because you're going backwards. It's a real ascension, or enlightened movement of uniting again.
Like it's an arrival somewhere, you've
But it's
landed.
the inversion of the first one, isn't it? It's the spirit man, so it's physical, but it's a transformed physical body. It's like the Umstülpung of the is the resurrect is like, yeah, the opposite. Like the glove turned inside out. Now
It's
it's
here.
not
at the
physical,
end.
it's transformed physical into the spirit.
It's like the ending of, it's like reaching the goal.
Moving into the spirit.
Mm.
Good. Well, I guess everybody must be exhausted. What would be, is there a general agreement that the directions are of course important, but you need a little bit more, right? Which is the inner vibration. So when we have gentle, weighty, and then I don't know what the last one would be, regal, right? For spirit man, life spirit, spirit self, then we would test that on other forms,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. That's why we're doing it, right?
Right. But it would be hard to say by looking at the form. Well, if you look at the astral, I guess the astral is in a way, a contraction, right?
Mhm. But it's a contraction on that side, but then it's an expansion on the other side.
Well, then it's not astral on the other side. That's my point, where we might have to expand our mind a little bit.
Yeah.
That we're no longer talking
4 levels.
astral, but this is spirit self,
Yeah.
and it has a completely different quality than sympathy, antipathy, design, goal, feeling.
Yeah.
And how do we know? Because we're reading what Steiner says. It's about thoughts.
Yeah.
So the idea that it's your instinctual feeling life is just not the case. And to make that case would make us all fools, right?
Yeah.
So
Actually, it's reverse.
yeah, it might be a good time. You know, it's interesting. Lowndes has the 4 levels, 50 examples, but nobody has an examples of the 7 levels, 50 examples. So that might be something we need to work on in the future, is to really think about what those higher bodies are, since it seems to be essential to his work, right?
Mhm.
So on that note, what would you guys like to do next time?
I find this quite fruitful. Why don't we just do the next number 2 movement next time? Like this. Just to see if they line up in the
Oh.
same way.
Okay, how about Team Eurythmy? Is this fruitful for you? Would you like to try number 2? Is that okay? So if there are certain laws, right? On the one hand, you ignore the work we did and then find new terminologies, maybe. So the best way to do this through empiricism. You try it out and you keep looking at every detail, left, right, up, down, and then in comparison. As long as you're comparing stuff, I think you're in the spirit of the work. I don't know what else to say. When you get lazy and you don't do it empirically, what's that?
I just had balloons again. How did that who's doing that?
You're probably hitting with your finger.
No, I didn't.
Too much Maui Wowie. Yeah, so see what you can do, and especially in terms of the audience. And we didn't really cover that so much in the last 3. We talked about it briefly. Like, is it important for dimly bind that the etheric is moving backwards? So allow, think about where one might start and one might not. And if you come up with new stuff, please share. Because it's about making discoveries and getting to to the core principles. And then if we have to go through 20 soul verses to figure it out, I think we'll figure it out by 5 verses.
Okay.
I hope you guys are as hopeful as that. But also, yeah, if you can, make sure you have your grid to see approximately how far back in the stage and the left and the right, whether they do have meanings. Is there a universal lawfulness that forms going left or right have some kind of significance? We can already see the significance a little bit. I imagine that the stronger forms will go to the right and maybe the more spiritual, gentler forms on the left. Who knows? But
Well, it'd
maybe,
be interesting just to map them out and see what it looks like.
yeah, that's your job.
Only for crazy people, but
Any other thoughts or sharings, or I don't know, changing some of this stuff, or suggesting ways to make it better? Does everybody have a migraine headache yet? No. Okay. Well, if no final comments, everybody, thank you again. It was obviously the best group we've had, because the real Eurythmists are here. Just kidding, Ron. Anyway,
He was outside.
he's outside.